So for the last session in this room today, we have an amazing human being that's going to come out here and talk about how carbon does not equal energy and does not equal cost, something he may try said correctly, because this is the whole point of his conversation with you today. So I'd like to have you join me in a warm welcome for Dany Daya from Etsy.
Hello, everyone. It's our last session in this room. We're going to go party after. Hopefully, you will get out with something useful, energizing, and more importantly, helpful for the environment. Oops. Don't worry about that. I'm Dany Daya. I lead cloud strategy and FinOps at Etsy. And today I'm going to be talking about Etsy's journey in sustainability. But before I deep dive into that, I want to give an overview of what the team structure and what are our responsibilities from a cloud strategy / FinOps perspective at Etsy. The way I think about our mandate or our workload, like in 3 different buckets. The first one is the typical FinOps kind of practices, which ranges from forecasting, monitoring, observability, optimization. The key differentiator for us is we approach all of these tasks from an engineering perspective, and we don't only think about cost, we always think about ROI or value, as JR was talking earlier yesterday. The second bucket is really vendor management. And when I think about vendor management, I think about it both from a strategic as well as an operational perspective. So we work closely with all teams to determine what exactly they are trying to solve for. Why are we seeking vendors and not building internally? What is the success criteria? How do we evaluate different options? Then once we do that, we engage with different vendors on proof of concept. Once we conclude that, we determine to go with vendor. My team and I handle negotiations. Once we onboard a vendor, we manage the day-to-day activities with that vendor. And all of that is for cloud, SaaS vendors, and also other IT or technology providers. The last bucket has a lot of tasks or initiatives that are basically, there is no single owner of them. One of those is, of course, sustainability. And another area that recently started becoming bigger scope of my team is enabling the usage of Gen AI and LLM at Etsy. With that, I'm going to shift back to sustainability. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is Etsy's journey with sustainability. I'm going to be going back all the way to 2016, when we were still on-prem, and walk you through our journey till today. And what you will notice is that our journey has kind of started good, then we started having some headwind, and then we kind of learned from them, and we started evolving. So it's really a journey, and we are always evolving. For those of you who are not familiar with Etsy, Etsy is a marketplace, 2-sided marketplace for a community of approximately 10 million amazing sellers and almost 100 million amazing buyers. What's so unique about Etsy is the items that are for sale on Etsy. We are really talking about 100 million items. One might argue that this is not a big enough number, but that's right. However, the unique aspect about those numbers is that there is no SKUs for these items. These are all majority of them are items created by individuals, by artists, and they are put for sale. So there is no SKU, there is no mass production, and this is what kind of make our business interesting and yet challenging, because we have to leverage a lot of technologies to really understand what are these items and how to surface them best to our buyers. And one of the things that's part of Etsy's DNA, and really it's our motto, is like, keep commerce human. And when we think about this, when we think about keeping commerce human, one way of doing that is by having very aggressive impact goals. And when I talk about impact goals, I think about them in 3 different buckets: social goals, governance, and environmental. On the social side, we kind of try to ensure that We have very high standards for equitable opportunities, diversity, inclusion in our ecosystem. And you will hear me talking about this concept a lot in our ecosystem. So from workforce all the way to vendors and everything in between. The second aspect is governance. We adhere to the highest ethical standards, and in some cases, for example, the AI governance, we kind of take the front seat in advocating and adopting these standards, even in situations where the industry is not fully clear about them yet. The third one is environmental. And this is, of course, what I'm going to be talking about in details. But what we talk about, or how we think about it, is really the measuring the impact of Etsy on the environment from A to Z, meaning our offices, us as an employees commuting in and out the office. All of that is being measured, as well as stuff like shipping and everything in between. And of course, one of the biggest contributors that Etsy has to the environment is our infrastructure, or our compute. This is the term that has been used at Etsy for 10 years now, almost, compute or sustainable compute. So, going back to the data centers days, and this is 2016, give or take, the industry carbon reporting and measuring carbon was not as popular as it is today. The focus was mainly on energy. When we think about energy, I think about kilowatt hours, how much electricity we are using. And that was kind of easy for us because, the monitoring side was easy because similar to how we used to receive the data center dollar invoice, we used to receive an energy invoice. So we knew exactly what we were consuming. And that kind of also broke down, or we had the ability to break down our usage by workload. We relied on that data to develop, again, back in 2016, what was our goal for 2025, which is reducing our energy intensity by 25%. And when we think about this one, and this is one of the similarities with the FinOps framework, or the unit economics to be precise, it's really we didn't want to penalize ourselves for growth. We knew the business is going to grow. So it didn't make sense for us to set ourselves accountable for the overall energy consumed as a goal. What we did instead, we kind of came up or debated a lot what is a correct unit of economics to use. We ended up, after a lot of discussions, relying on sessions or user sessions, or in Etsy's word, we call it visits. So basically, our goal, if we want to deep dive into it, became we want to make sure that we reduce our kilowatt hour per visit by 25% by 2025. Things were going fine, and we were what we used to call like in the run mode, till we moved to the cloud. And here I'm like 2018 timeframe. Before I do that, I don't know what's the setup in this room, but I want to ask a question. What do you think is that picture? Server racks? That all you can see there? So, what you are looking at, you're partially right. What you're looking at is my colleague, Emily Sommer, who's a solution architect at Etsy. She was actually in a server rack in New Jersey. Emily is the champion of sustainability and energy at Etsy. She works in engineering, and she loved the old way of reporting. She hated the move to the cloud. She was supposed to be next to me to tell you that I screwed it up for her by moving to the cloud, but unfortunately, for personal reasons, she couldn't make it. But for Emily, the major challenge, and all of us who went through this transition, is that once you move to the cloud, you lose tons of visibility around energy. Yes, there is a lot of value in the cloud, but from an energy perspective, and again, I'm talking 2018, This was a huge step back for us. So we started thinking, can we use cost as a proxy for our energy usage? And if you think about cost as like two components, it's unit price and usage. It makes sense that usage correlate with energy. But if you talk about the unit price, it's really misleading because it has aspects like profit, like margins, discounts. All of these stuff, they don't correlate with energy. So we weren't convinced that cost is the way to go. However, we started thinking, and when I say we, a lot of this is really Emily. Unfortunately, again, she's not here to talk about it. We started thinking about like, what is really the cloud? At the end of the day, it's a bunch of computers. So can we be creative in estimating what is the energy associated with those computers in the cloud? And this is where we kind of started walking again, and we developed what we call the Cloud Joules energy estimation. So bear with me for a second. If you look at this, you can see kind of like what is the core components of the cloud. You have core, you have RAM, you have networking, you have managed services. So what we started saying is that can we estimate the energy per usage for each of these components? If we can do that, we know the usage because the cloud provider provides us with the usage. We will be able to have our total usage. We decided to focus on compute and storage. We ignored memory and networking because they were much harder to find any data about them. And we went to research. For months, Emily and others spent time researching the industry, what papers are out there that will help us understand what is the kilowatt hour per terabyte of storage or per compute cycle. What we did, we gathered this data from, and here I'm mentioning a couple of these resources, and we kind of put it on top of what we know about our cloud provider, their public information about data, about energy consumption. And we started having a graph like this. So what you are looking at is, in orange or yellow, is like the energy consumption, which was accurate based on the data center's data. And what you can see in purple is our estimate of our kilowatt hour on Google Cloud. And kind of it makes sense for us that by the time we started seeing an increase in Google Cloud energy, we started seeing a decrease in the data center energy because we started shutting it down. So directionally, the data was accurate. Also, it was accurate in the sense that overall, the total consumption is lower than we started. And this is, again, the hypothesis was the cloud is more efficient. So everything was pointing in the correct direction. However, we were not convinced. We went to the industry. We worked with 2 specialists who vetted our methodology, kind of like approved our assumptions that this is accurate. We also worked with our auditor who assured the data. And what we also did, we published it as what we call at Etsy Code as Craft, which is our engineering blog, public-facing. And we wanted to invite other people to talk about it or to partner with us about this. And again, at the end of the session, you will have a barcode that lists all of these documents if you are interested in them. So we were extremely happy that Cloud Joule was born and it's working, and it unlocked tons for us. We started having based on this, we started building internal reporting that made it much easier for us to track our usage and see how we are performing compared to our goals. Also, we started making sense of this data. For example, and I think this is 2018 or from 2019. Like, our energy consumption was equivalent to 1.5 million households in America. And this kind of data made it much easier for engineers or other Etsy admin to really have a sense of how can we think about our environmental impact. And the third thing that we did is public reporting. It's part of our 10K. It has been part of our 10K for years now, all depending on CloudJoule. Then we partnered with other companies. ThoughtWorks is one of them. And what they did is they took our CloudJoules and they followed a very similar methodology to build their tool. They called it like cloud carbon footprint tooling or measurement. And again, all of that was before cloud providers started providing this data for users. So again, we didn't have any of that, so we needed to rely on something to monitor our usage and check our progress toward our goals. As everything, nothing is complete. CloudJoule has tons of advantages, tons of value, but it wasn't perfect. The two things I want to call out is, number one, the time needed to refresh these coefficients. Like, what it took us like 6 months to calculate the energy per terabyte, the energy per compute cycle. This became a lot harder as we started using more and more cloud resources, and we needed to refresh this data on an ongoing basis. The other challenge, and there are two charts about it, is really when we first migrated to the cloud in 2018, the bulk of our usage was really raw virtual machines and storage, not much managed services. However, in 2024, majority of our usage, or close to half of it, is now managed services. CloudJoule didn't have any visibility into managed services. So we had to start thinking, what should we do there? And this is here, we are probably talking about 2021, 2022. Cloud providers shined here, and they started providing carbon reporting. So Google started providing carbon reporting that gave us some sense of visibility into our usage. Remember, we used to be reporting on kilowatt hours. Now the gold standard is becoming carbon, so it's great for us to rewire everything in the back end to make it in carbon, which is great, but again, work for us. And the other thing is the data that we received from the cloud provider wasn't as detailed as we would ideally love. So it was an improvement, definitely a step in the correct direction, not ideal, but definitely we were much more satisfied about it. But then this happened. We realized as we progressed is that we are no longer relying only on cloud providers. We are now relying on multiple providers, mainly SaaS providers. So if you think about this visual that shows how our cloud used to dominate our usage in 2018, as we look at it now, there is a decent chunk of that usage coming from SaaS providers or other technology providers. So again, even the carbon reporting that we get from the cloud is not covering the full pie. And this is where we are today. We are back to the drawing board and trying to figure out what is a useful proxy that we can rely on that will help us track not only the cloud carbon footprint, but also all the other SaaS providers that we rely on. And this is, for example, again, JR was talking about this in the keynotes on day one. This is a great area where focus can come into play. Like, just imagine a world in which cloud providers and SaaS are providing unified billing data. And one of the columns in this billing data is carbon footprint. This is exactly what we are hoping to get to. However, back at Etsy, we are still trying to figure out, we don't have the answer, if anyone has the answer. Yesterday, I chatted with someone who presented about this topic, about how they are doing it. Yes, there are interesting ideas. We would love to collaborate on how we can get the carbon data from all SaaS or technology provider that we interact with. As I close, I want to kind of end with a call to action. When we are talking about cloud or energy journey, it's really reporting, it's really never going to be perfect. So don't wait till you have perfect reporting, perfect targets to start taking actions. Every one of us can start taking actions just now. So let us try to set targets, rely on whatever data we have in place. Even cost can be a good starting point. Then, one of the things that we wanted to get better at, we still want to get better at, is to put a framework that will help us measure or kind of weigh all projects on cost, performance, but also on carbon footprint. We are not there yet, but we aspire to be there. And the last thing, as we speak about inspiration, it's really what we noticed is that the moment we start showing engineers this data, the moment we start showing the impact, they are, even if the measurement is not accurate, or not complete, let's say not accurate, they are inspired to take small steps that will help us move in the correct direction. So, this is all for me today. This is the QR code if you want to look at any of these documents. And I understand there are no Q&A here, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them outside. Thank you very much.
Dany, you left me time for questions. You're not off the hook. Sorry. So first of all, another huge round of applause for Dany. That's amazing. I know this is a conversation that a lot of people want to have with you. And after this, there'll be time if you guys want to meet out in the foyer there that we can, or you can have some one-on-one time or some more conversation with you. But listening to what you were talking about, and also just you and I chatting earlier, I did have a couple of questions. And I wish I could allow all of you to ask questions, but we don't have mics and it won't be recorded, so you just get me. So first of all, one of the things we talked about when you and I were discussing the background is where do the sustainability goals live? Like, who owns that? Who runs the governance of sustainability goals?
Yeah, so at Etsy, we have a senior director who leads a team that they're focused on all our impact goals. Like, they are the team that set, in collaboration with different partners or internal partners, these goals. So what happens is, for example, they come up with this goal of 2025, we want to reduce it by 25%. Then they work with Emily and I and others in the engineering organization to kind of see from an infrastructure perspective, from a compute perspective, how can we monitor that? And then what they do, they aggregate all of that from us, from people that, for example, monitor the shipping, from people that monitor the offices, and they aggregate all of that, and they show the company progress, and they publicly report on that at the aggregate levels.
All right, great. Well, thank you. And this is the one, so this, I'm going to let you know that I was talking to Dany beforehand. I'm like, what kind of questions do you think people would ask you or whatever? And he's like, this is a question I ask myself all the time. And it wasn't included in the presentation. So I'm like, well, if you ask yourself this all the time, then I'm sure everybody wants to know the answer to this too, which is, do you ever encounter a situation where your carbon energy goals clash with your cost goals? And then how do we handle that if that happens? So when your carbon or your energy goals are not in alignment.
Yep. So the short answer is yes, we have encountered situations like this. But if you look at our journey, like when we first migrated to the cloud, we knew that we weren't optimized. So the major focus was on optimization. And by virtue of thing, when you are optimizing and using less resources, you are really aligned with the energy goals. So that was fine. But we've have encountered ideas from engineers, and again, getting back to the inspiring engineers, we got amazing ideas, and this is one of my favorite, was like, in our kind of like structure, we run batch jobs at night. And for those of you who are not familiar, batch jobs are kind of like hundreds of thousands of cores that are needed for a very small period of time to achieve specific results that are needed for the business. Usually we run those at night. And what happens is that based on our data center location, we know that at night, the energy sources are not as environmentally friendly as in the day. So the idea that they have, can we shift running these jobs during the day? Unfortunately, these jobs were critical to provide timely data, and we weren't able to greenlight this.
Yeah.
But this is one of the ideas that we love to collaborate with others to see how can we be more innovative in mapping or achieving business goals without losing sight of carbon goals.
I like that. So sometimes this clash is happening between your carbon goals and your cost goals is just driving more innovation within your own team and your own organization.
Yep.
So hey, there we go. And then just one last thing, because I know there's a lot of folks in here that maybe they're doing this really well. They're just getting started. Some folks, I think, are intimidated when you start thinking about, again, like, oh my gosh, what if this clashes with my cost goals? I don't know where to start. How do I begin this? This is important to me. How do I drive this with everybody? So the one basic question I want to ask you is for those folks, like, how do you start this? Like, how do you start thinking about this within your own organization?
That's a great question. I think my answer with that would be action-oriented. Okay. And if I go back to the days of old days where we started having the 3 Rs, didn't apply to compute too much, but it was like the reduce, reuse, and then recycle. And it's the same concept, like start by reducing. We can all take actions to reduce whatever resources we are using. So the compute, the infrastructure, the storage is not any different. So let us start. I think I heard someone saying today, just pull up your phone and delete 2 emails, and you will be reducing your carbon footprint. It's stuff that are as simple as that will help us lead there. So take actions, no matter how small they are. The overall impact, if more and more people do take these actions, the impact is going to be major.
Amazing. So what I actually heard you say is when I get back from FinOps X Europe and I archive my entire email inbox, I'm actually doing something good.
I mean, I don't, archiving, not necessarily, but deleting, definitely yes.
Or delete it. If I delete it all, I'll just delete them. It's okay. Just email me again if it's important.
Just delete the reminders.
That's not horrible. Anyways, again, a huge thanks to Dany.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate everything you've done. Hold your applause 1 second, because I am going to tell you, we're going to leave. This is ending just a few minutes early, but that's okay, because we're starting to set up the break out there, and there's going to be a break with snacks until, let me see, 4:45, and then after that, there's some really amazing breakout sessions still continuing on. Most of them are downstairs in the studio rooms, and I highly encourage you to do all of that. But don't forget that at 7 o'clock tonight is our end of the conference party reception. It was supposed to be outside, but as we've all seen this weather roll in yesterday and today, I mean, probably not. It'll probably be inside, but you'll hear us, you'll see us. So with that, again, thank you, Dany. Thank you to all of you for being in here, and we'll see you next later.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X Europe content on our YouTube channel playlist. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for speakers to help our channel. We appreciate your support.